Welcome back to Halloween House. Today we're going to talk about Alice Mabel Gray, who is better known as Diana the Dunes. She was born in Chicago on March 25th, 1881.
She was the daughter of a physician, and at age 16 in 1897 she entered the University of Chicago. At that time, only 30% of women accounted for the student population at that time. She did receive many honors, and she studied math, astronomy, Greek, and Latin.
After college, unfortunately, she was typecast into normal, everyday women's jobs, which would not make a very big salary, and her bosses were probably men who were not as educated as she was.
Or qualified. In October of 1915, she decided to flee the restraints of civilization. She took the South Shore train to what is now Ogden Dunes to live in the peace and quiet of the Indiana Dunes.
So one thing that Alice did say in an interview is that she wanted to live her own life, a free life. The life of a salary earner in the cities is slavery, a constant fight for the means of living. Here it is so different. My salary when I worked was nothing extraordinary, and yet here I have lived all winter and summer on the last pay envelope that I received in Chicago. I buy only bread and salt. When I came here in October 1915, I had nothing but a jelly glass, a knife, a spoon, a blanket, and 2 guns. For 4 nights before discovering this abandoned hut, I slept under the stars. Then I began housekeeping, and all the furniture I have made of driftwood. Everything is driftwood here, including myself, and I have named the place Driftwood.
So her unusual escape did catch the attention of reporters, and they gave her the moniker Diana of the Dunes. And Diana is the Greek goddess of hunting and the moon.
She lived about 4 years at Driftwood, and in 1920 she met Paul Wilson. He was a beachcomber with a checkered past. A lot of the people in the dunes were criminals, sketchy people. They were hiding from something, and it was hard to catch them there, so that's why a lot of them were there. But they moved together to another shack that was called Wren's Nest.
Paul Wilson and Alice presumably had 2 daughters with her. We could not find any birth certificates, but that wouldn't be unusual because, of course, she would have had them, at the dunes in the wild. There wouldn't be any birth certificates. And after her death, the 2 girls were removed to protective services.
In June of 1922, Diane unfortunately suffered a skull fracture, and Paul was shot in the foot during a fight with a deputy sheriff that accused them of looting summer cottages and robbing fish nets. She did recover in a hospital, but was not the same after that. And that same year in November, they apparently decided that they were going to go down to Texas in a motorboat, just weaving down streams and rivers and creeks. But whatever their aspirations were in Texas, it must not have come through, because 6 months later they were back in the dunes.
And it is commonly believed that Paul was abusive towards her. In February of 1925, she died of uremic poisoning, and that is thought to be caused by repeated blows to her abdomen. Her wish was to be cremated atop of Mount Tom, her favorite dune. And Paul had already built the funeral pyre, and he was going to cremate her up there and just let the ashes just naturally spread. But the authorities kind of forced him into a funeral and burial, and that was paid for by one of Alice's siblings.
So at the funeral, Paul was very distraught, and he pulled a gun on a few people and was, of course, removed from the ceremony. And you figure people get distraught at funerals. Obviously, this funeral was taking place not the way that she wished, so that would make you distraught as well. But pulling a gun is pretty extreme, so that kind of gives you a little hint into probably his temper and his temperament.
Paul remained in the Ogden Dunes for just a short time. He did end up moving to California, but before he left the dunes, he removed all of Diana's books and manuscripts. He sold the shack to a neighbor who set it on fire.
So after everything had wound down and everything was gone, there started to be stories about people seeing an apparition that might have been Diane in the dunes, feelings about her spirit, and some of these stories even still existed into the 60s. So she's definitely something that may still be hovering around and populating those dunes where she loved to be. There's also some other popular storylines that are usually repeated about Alice.
Misconceptions.
Yes, including
that she was known for skinny dipping and then running around on the beach naked. There wouldn't have been running water, so her skinny dipping was simply her bathing. It was a matter of personal hygiene. We do not believe, through our research and what we know of the dunes, no one is running around the dunes naked. It's rugged today,
yes,
let alone what it was back in, 1915, 1920 when she was there.
Yeah, I mean, hiking through some of the trails, you walk through clouds of mosquitoes, there's sand fleas, there's ticks, there's chiggers.
Indiana rattlesnakes.
Yeah, you would not want to be naked running around in the woods there.
Yes, we do believe that's a myth.
So, we think Diane was just bathing and probably washing her clothes. How many clothes do you have when you're out there?
Right.
So we made a little trip out here to the dunes in honor of Alice. We wanted to get her a little present.
She did want to be cremated and her ashes spread here on Mount Tom, to be specific, but unfortunately that just didn't work out for her.
So we're bringing her a little of the dunes back to where she rests now. We're here today at the beautiful Oak Hill Cemetery in Gary, Indiana. You can see very, very pretty, lots of old graves.
Okay, and we would like to dispel some myths about where Alice is buried. She is not buried in Oak Lawn in an unmarked grave. She is not buried in one of the dunes at Indiana. Our friend Alice is right here, as you saw in section E, in a clearly marked grave.
Now originally there probably wasn't a stone here, but it was erected at some point in her memory so we could come visit.
So since Alice's final wishes were to be cremated at the dunes, and unfortunately that didn't happen for her, we're going to bring a little bit of the dunes to her.
Rest in peace, Alice, and hopefully more people will come visit you now.
Yes. So thank you for listening to our story. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please list them below. We'll always reply, and we have a lot more really interesting stories coming up. So if you could hit that subscribe button, and as always,
Stay spooky.